Hello guys, I am Kelsey Fauser, as hopefully you guys know. Like Brittany, I will also be presenting about a public relations communications crisis. Thank you. So mine is about the 2010 BP oil spill. It's kind of ironic because every time I tell people I am doing the BP oil spill, sadly they always ask, well, what year? So I think that's really sad, but unfortunately with this one, BP did not handle it correctly. More than 200 million gallons of pure crude oil. Oil in today's society can be viewed as black money. And with this quantity, someone definitely just hit the jackpot. But this wasn't the pot of gold British Petroleum, or BP, was hoping for, as those 200 million gallons leaked into the Gulf Coast, causing one of the worst oil disasters in history. Along with leaving the coast polluted and the public outrage, BP faced close to $40 billion in fines, cleanup costs, and settlements as a result of the oil spill that occurred in 2010. BP found a pot of gold, but it wasn't what they were hoping for when those 200 million pumped into the ocean. This case was the first of its kind for the public relations community and was miserably mishandled by BP. There are many areas that need to be fixed, with many problems stemming from BP CEO Tony Hayward. Being the chosen spokesperson during the crisis is scary, but Hayward miserably mishandled his role. While there were many parties involved in the oil spill, BP was the only commercial company to be bombarded by the media and blamed for this oil spill. During this disaster, there seemed to be a constant habit of acting first, thinking later, and this dug BP a huge hole with their crisis communications. During this disaster, there seemed to be lots of blaming on other companies and not blaming on themselves. This is what made this individual public relations case so frightening, but also very worthy of public relations research. This presentation will consist of 3 items. The first will be the background of BP, the second will be the crisis, and then third will be BP's response to it. In order to understand the crisis in the situation, it is a must to first understand the events that unfolded during BP and their oil history. BP, as I've stated, is also known as British Petroleum. It was first founded in 1908 when oil was found in Persia after a long and difficult search. The first successful wells were drilled at Majed Soliman, excuse my accent, with crude oil being pumped to a refinery built in Abadan. The first cargo of oil was exported in March of 1912. From there, BP took off as a company. BP has made many discoveries, whether they be small or large, that has advanced the oil industry. BP became the world's largest oil company when it merged with the United States Amoco Corporation in 1998. BP is considered to be one of the world's leading international oil and gas companies in today's society. It is estimated that there are around 80 countries in the world that operate as BP and have an estimated of 83,000 employees. Now, on to the crisis. On April 20th, 2010, an explosion and fire occurred on the BP-licensed Transocean drilling rig Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico. 11 people were reported missing, and to this day they are still missing, so they are assumed dead, and 17 are injured during the blast. It happened when a blowout preventer, which is used to stop release of crude oil, ironically, failed to activate. The oil rig sank in the 5,000 feet of water on the 22nd of the month, and a 5-mile long oil rig slick was reported. Search and rescue operations were activated to contain the situations. By April 25th, the United States Coast Guard underwater camera reported that the well was leaking 1,000 boils per day of crude oil into the ocean. By April 28th, the Coast Guard reported the flow to be up to 5,000 barrels per day. BP at the time had lied to the public and informed them that the oil rig was only leaking 1,000, even though they were updated with the Coast Guard's new information. At this point, control burns of the oil slick started, and the state of Louisiana, which the slick was going to first hit, went into a state of emergency. Also on April 28th, British Petroleum started to drill a relief well next to the sunken one in order to help get that oil out of the water. On May 5th, Hayward, or the CEO of BP, stated to BBC, or the British company that was to interview them, so like the news there, that the blowout preventer that had caused the explosion was not their fault, but rather Transocean's fault. Transocean was the owners of the rig, but they're operated under BP. So it's kind of this weird toss-up between the ones, because BP wanted to deflect the blame when Transocean owned the rig, but they're operated under BP. So it's kind of this weird dilemma between them. Transocean did not own the rig, or did own the rig, but it was operated under BP. Hayward stated, quote by quote, BP will be judged not on the basis of an accident that, frankly was not our accident. Strike one for BP in public relations. Now, BP agreed to give those affected by the oil spill a $20 billion down payment for the compensation. But you need to have a legit reason, and this got Hayward into some very hot water. Shortly after, Hayward is charged for stonewalling the public or not answering questions concerning the spill. He says to them instead, quote, "There is no one who wants this over more than I do. I would like my life back." Strike two for PR for public relations, or for BP. Although it seems like BP is not doing anything to stop the leak, they actually were. They tried many different options to stop the leak. One way was to place a small containment dome, also known as a top hat, over the leak to help funnel the oil out to the surface. Sadly, this would fail. BP also tried packing mud and clay into the leak in the hopes of clogging it. Yes, this too did fail. During all of this, Hayward was reported and pictured at a boat race with his son, and BP does not answer letters back from concerned publics and environmental impact. Strike three for BP with public relations. So here's an example of it. It's really blurry, but this is them trying to get the top hat over it. So as you can see, this is the pipe, which is going to be right in here. And then this is the Coast Guard camera. So they try to put this top hat onto it to cover it so that the oil would get pumped up back up to the surface. But it didn't work. And also what happens with this is that if you put the top hat on incorrectly, it actually creates pressure underneath the oil, which will cause another oil spill. So all of that oil will come out, which is terrifying that they didn't realize that, but it happens. And then this is the packing in of the clay. So they bring it obviously on ship because it's in the water, and they would get this clay, and this is the oil rig that had broken off, and they would try to put it in there, but the stream was going at such a high rate that it actually pushed that oil and clay back out. Yay. So now, since this is the biggest spill in history and one of its only kind, it was hard for BP to know what to do. Sadly, BP did not reinvent anything, and they miserably mishandled this. The first major misstep occurred a few days after the oil rig sunk into the ocean. BP told the public that the rig was leaking 1,000 barrels of oil a day, while the real figure was 5,000 barrels per day. Even after knowing the new figures, BP's spokesperson downplayed the number and said it was between 1,000 and 500. This alone hurt the trust between the public and BP, which would haunt them for the next 100 days of their crisis. Next, in BP's first press release, they tried to deflect the blame of the crisis onto the oil rig owner, Transocean. In the release, they emphasized how Transocean and other parties were involved, and therefore, different failures are to blame for the explosion and fire. To fully take the blame off of BP, the press release also stated that BP offered full support of those who are affected, and that it wasn't their problem. With not telling the truth to the public and deflecting the blame, BP failed at their public relations strategies. But in consideration, BP did not do everything incorrectly. One of the best things that they actually did was making websites and tweeting out during the oil spill. On their websites, they constantly updated their information so that the public can go on and actually look at it and see what was going on. Others, when they tweeted it, they also tweeted a telephone number that you can call if you saw oil-slicked animals. So if you were walking on the beach and suddenly oh my gosh, there's a bird that's covered in oil, you could go to that number and call them, and BP would send out the Coast Guard to go and get those animals and clean them on up. So that was one way that BP did it. Also, another way that they did was that they showed a picture of inside the control room of BP while they were doing this cleanup. So that really helped the public to understand, okay, they are doing something. They are really trying to clean this up and everything. So that was good. In the end, BP did not handle their public relations crisis management very well. Although there is an abundant amount of conflicting ideas on how and what the BP oil spill was handled, there's one universal consensus that the organization did not handle this crisis correctly. This consequently has enabled other organizations later on in history to learn from the mistakes made and has thus reformed the way public relations professionals handle their crises. Without this case, it may have been impossible to learn and understand how quality and well-thought-out public relations specialists can save a company's image and restore their relationship with the public. The company suffered a $40 billion loss in charges. Could you imagine what they could have done if their public relations was better? Strike three, BP. You're out. Thank you.